Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen, Allincrypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another jam-packed daily market update. We're going to be kicking the video off with an interesting take on crypto's path to adoption. The one it's already been on, and the fact that it's outperforming the likes of the internet by nearly 2x, and the path that it is going to embark on based on where it's came from, taking us to over 4 billion users and potentially $100 trillion in market cap, sort of past 2030 and so on. I don't think that's unrealistic, certainly given what the cryptocurrency space is doing for the world. We know what it's doing financially, and we saw a glimpse of what it's going to do moving forwards, and that is kind of become a record for the world. And we saw that with the likes of the United States, and then putting the Commerce Secretary actually putting the GDP stats on a number of blockchains leveraging Python Chainlink. And this is this kind of broader application of a kind of global truth ledger. And this is marching us towards a global world. Crypto really is the missing piece of that puzzle. So we're going to start the video off there, sort of maybe cheering you guys up in regards to, if you're crypto investors, you might be quite fed up with the current time that we're having. Unfortunately, August, September, typically not such great months. You've got a lot of economic data coming out this week. We had really great GDP stats on Thursday. It's interesting because the Atlanta Fed is actually now predicting for Q3 3.5% plus. And this is sort of showing a lot better economic data than previously expected. But you do have data this week that's going to be telling and perhaps set the pace for the month ahead. So by this week, I mean the week we're going into starting on Monday or crossing over from Sunday night. You know, we've obviously got non-farm payroll. I think you're going to continue to see dampened stats on that. Remember that the stock market is correlated with economic activity, and this might put a little bit of further headwind into the markets at a time when they're already experienced them, being September. It's a notorious month for the stock markets. I'll also talk about the next 12 months to 18 months and the crypto ETFs. We looked at all 92 of them yesterday that we have coming, but it's never been a better time to be in crypto. It perhaps doesn't feel like that. We're here to hopefully get you fired up. So we've got a lot to get into. Let's kick things off. This is a thread from Raul. Not sure where I sit on Raul's analysis and him as a kind of market individual. I do think, however, he's got he interviews some amazing guests and puts out to the general population some actually really good information. And he has some great guests on that kind of contribute to the pool of learning of markets. So credit where it's due for that. Him personally and his takes, I kind of find myself sometimes agreeing with, sometimes not. But this is a very interesting one. And like I say, to kind of summarize all that blur on Raul, I think he's doing a generally good job of putting financial information out there into the hands of individuals. Crypto users versus internet users yearly growth. So this is 1 year equals users, sub 5 million. And what you can see here is this is the total internet users in 1992, and this is crypto users going all the way back. And you can see this sort of every year that you have, so starting 2016. It is interesting because when this starts is slightly skewed. They've chose 2016, 2019, but for the purpose that I'm trying to highlight here, you know, crypto has seen further adoption than the internet has, and it's going to likely to continue to do so. That's what this next slide is about. It says crypto is still being adopted at twice the speed of the internet, from 5 million IP addresses versus 5 million wallets. Very like for like. To kind of maybe give a bit of a pushback on this, I think you've got to remember that wallets don't equal users. I have multiple wallets. Probably in terms of all the wallets I've ever created, you're talking hundreds, or 100 plus, I would say, on pretty much every chain. You know, starting off from MetaMask right in the early days, or Bitcoin, sort of paper wallets right back in the early days to now. I don't think it's estimated, to give you some of our own stats here, that it's over 500 million people own crypto. That's not actually use it. So I think there's differences here. Ownership doesn't equal usage. Perhaps it does in a way. But they reckon 500 million people plus own crypto. I think that figure is probably a quarter in reality. And actually, in terms of usage and utility, it's very hard to work that out. If you look at sort of active wallet addresses, you're talking very low millions, if not hundreds of thousands on certain chains anyway. So I think the real picture of actual crypto usage is actually far lower. But in terms of adoption via wallets, it's obviously doing quite well in regards to comparing it with IP, which is a lot more specific than, you know, you can pinpoint one sort of user or household on that rather than address it. So interesting stat. The interesting thing is where this has us projected going forward. And it's on its way to 4 billion users by 2030, which is literally only around the corner, guys. I mean, it's 2025, 5 years' time will go in a blink of an eye. You can see the comparables here. It's on a very similar trajectory to the internet, and with that, you're going to get a great wealth transfer, just like you saw pre the internet. The largest companies, a lot of them were actually sort of Japanese banks, IBM, things like this. Today, it's all internet companies. And if you look at the largest rich list, it's all sort of internet-enabled individuals. In the future, that'll be crypto, and that's what happens every time a technology comes along like crypto. It kind of transfers wealth. That's what we're here for on this channel, and this is just showing some stats in regards to the direction perhaps that it's heading in. So over $4 billion projected in 2030. This is interesting. He now puts forward a take, and I think this is a slightly harder one to work out, and that will take us from $4 trillion in market cap today to 100 trillion by 2032 to 2034. Wouldn't that be nice? That's where you see a lot of those coins that we believe are getting to $1 trillion eventually in terms of market cap actually achieve that and go above and beyond. XRP is an easy shout now. There's lots of others out there. I do cover them and hold them in my portfolio. But what they're looking at, digital assets are only 4 trillion in market cap and will hit 100 trillion in 10 years. Digital assets are predicted to be adopted by 1 billion people by 2030. Suggesting they may offer asymmetric risk returns on today's prices. And it's very interesting. I'm not entirely sure how they've worked this out. Maybe just we're looking at a linear chart and seeing how that evolves and if it continues at the pace it has. Whether it will or not is still to be seen. But crypto with fundamental adoption will increase in market cap. Certainly once you start to see the usage and utility. And this is the unique thing that crypto offers. Is it's not just a stock, right, where you speculate on the company. And stocks really have kind of almost become Bitcoin in the sense that they're kind of a hedge against a debasing fiat system. Cryptos not only offer all of that investability, they offer things like rewards via yield opportunities. They also offer a kind of a demand side, certainly, in regards to usage and utility. So I don't think we've seen anywhere near the capabilities from a price propellant point of view of these individual assets once they start to get used and utilized on a mass scale and adopted in globally. It's a really amazing picture that crypto offers, and it's good to sort of cover all this stuff and look at, you know, some projections in regards to where it's going moving forward. Certainly in times like this when we're in the sort of summer doldrums. It then goes on to say, and that is driven by two secular trends, adoption and debasement. Debasement explains 90% of price action. Adoption explains 100% of outperformance versus debasement. Yeah, so talking about sort of money supply here, and which we all know about. It's a very simple game that everybody should be playing. And that is the game, we don't need to go much further on this thread. That is the game of essentially investing in assets to work with the monetary system, not against it. And if you don't invest in assets, you're very much climbing up a greased pole in terms of increasing that financial needle in your life. So very interesting. Never forget that, guys. Crypto is on an adoption curve. Whether the stats that Real Vision are putting out there are correct or not is debatable. But it's very clearly using the internet as a barometer on a path of adoption, actually outperforming that. And that's only going to continue, in my opinion. And we're very lucky to be speculating on a technology in its kind of infancy in regards to where it's going. Let's talk about the week that you've got ahead of you. So on Thursday, you had some great GDP stats come out. They were great for not just the fact that they came out at 3.3, which was well over expectations, the best quarter since 2023. A very different picture to what was painted in regards to all the things that Trump was putting into place. But they also released that data on the blockchain. And this is the broader application for a DLT outside of just financial instruments and changing the financial sector, which is huge, right? $100 trillion use case potentially on its own in regards to globalizing the world financially. But GDP data gives us some more confidence in regards to what we're expecting for the stock market, which is continued upside based on the fact that it entirely engulfed what is technically a bear market, being 20% sell-off plus every time this has happened, going all the way back to 1981, you've seen continuation, and we expect that today. And those GDP stats, in my opinion, sort of gave us further confirmation of what's to come. You do now have interesting things like from the Atlanta Fed. This says, holy smokes, Atlanta Fed is now projecting that Q3 GDP will be 3.5%, a massive expansion. The US economy is running hot. I agree. I think there's pockets of it that are hurting though, however. And capital, these old metrics, and they will be tailored specifically with DLTs because they can do this. Certainly when money is ran through DLTs, you can aggregate data from them. But there are pockets of the economy that's hurt. So we always get this. When we say the stats look good, the official stats, we always get comments, and we're sympathetic towards those comments that actually this isn't the case. Like when we say inflation isn't an issue. I understand it's an issue. That's why I'm an investor. I just don't think that it's an issue in terms of the official stats that they release. And they're not going to show an issue. And that's kind of what monetary policy and other things and economies are set on. Whether that's the actual case or not is very debatable. But this is the Atlanta Fed now predicting real growth ahead. And I think that supports continuation for the S&P and markets more broadly. We did an interesting thing when we looked at the IWM, which we think is actually going to break out against the S&P 500, showing a real risk appetite in the same way that BTC dominance continuing to roll and go in the direction we set out for it does. But it is an interesting week that we've got ahead of us, and actually there might be some sluggish data. So just to run you through the week, obviously Monday's Labor Day, so US stock market's closed. We've got Chinese manufacturing PMIs, Eurozone employment rate, or unemployment rate is 6.2. So you talk about 4.2 for the US. Actually, US has got decent stats really across the board. Tuesday, you've got Eurozone inflation. We are seeing upticks in inflation across the board, only minor in the EU. We've got US ISM manufacturing. Slight uptick in this. Australian GDP. So massively beating Australia in terms of GDP right now. And most other countries, the United States. Chinese service PMIs. We've got US JOLT jobs. And then we've got ADPs, US initial jobless claims. So these are expected to fall. ISM, PMIs. It's going to be interesting to see what that comes out at. We're still not seeing that ISM cycle yet. Friday's a big one with non-farm payroll. Expected to come out at 50,000 jobs. And employment's supposed to stay the same, which I think would be positive. But I think we do have an interesting week in regards to data ahead of us that may show dampening in certain areas that could be a headwind for the likes of the S&P at a time when it's going into September, which is typically a bad month. So I could see actually September not being so great. Unfortunately, guys, I could be 180 degrees wrong. I'd love to be. Remember, we are ultimately bullish just because we're saying September might be a bit of a turbulent month. We're very bullish on crypto, but this looks a little bit toppish to me in terms of on the short term. It may need to sort of correct or sort itself out of this in the months of sort of September before seeing that continuation. So you could maybe just chop around and do something like this and set up some sort of continuation. I'm not entirely sure how September's going to play out, but yeah, we'll see what this economic data sort of setting the pace at the start of the month does for the rest of the month. There is going to be, I think, coming on the back end of September, a lot of ETFs, over 90 plus crypto ETFs that likely could get more clarity and ready to be approved. There's so many reasons to be bullish on the crypto space. I think they far outweigh the bearish ones, even if we do see some perhaps turbulence short on the shorter time frame. It is just exactly that, just like what we're experiencing for crypto right now. In the bigger sort of scheme and trajectory of things, crypto is absolutely primed and ready for that continuation. My favorite chart at the moment has got to be the total market cap excluding Bitcoin. So this is the altcoins, and this is literally just on the cusp of breaking into all-time highs. Very cup and handly. You're going to see a $6.4 trillion market out of this, excluding Bitcoin. Bitcoin likely takes us to over 10 trillion before I think we see any sort of major correction. We'll see on that. I will be doing an update for Patreons, the bull versus the bear, later on today. That's it from me, guys. Never lose sight of that big picture. Crypto's on a very clear trajectory. You just have to contend with annoying periods like the one we're in when the markets don't really do that much. However, we will be back off to the races. This is still a bull in my opinion. I'm going to love and leave you on that note. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.